I came home to help wrap Christmas gifts. Instead, I found my fiancé on the floor with a guy, half naked under wrapping paper. He said, "Dude, wrong room." I came home earlier than planned because the schedule finally opened up, and December traffic made no sense to fight twice in one night. The idea was simple and harmless. I would help wrap Christmas gifts, clear the table, maybe order food, and make the evening feel lighter than the past few weeks had been. The apartment already smelled like pine cleaner and cardboard when I stepped inside, which felt right for the season and wrong for the silence. The lights were on, but the place felt paused, like a scene waiting for sound to resume. Rolls of wrapping paper were stacked near the couch. Gift bags leaned against the wall. A box of tape sat open on the coffee table. Everything suggested preparation, order, and intention. I set my keys down and called her name, expecting an answer from the bedroom or kitchen. Nothing came back. I moved further in, shoes still on, jacket unzipped, mind already sorting small annoyances and small comforts. The bedroom door was half open, and the light inside was on. I assumed she was sorting gifts or hiding something she did not want me to see yet. I pushed the door open without hesitation. The scene made no effort to disguise itself. She was on the floor, not the bed, tangled in bright red wrapping paper that had been torn and flattened. Her sweater was gone. His shirt was half off, stuck around one arm. Their bodies froze the moment the door moved, like they had been snapped into place by a sudden command. For a second, none of us moved or spoke, and the room felt smaller than it had ever been. The man looked at me first, eyes wide, breathing heavy, his brain clearly scrambling for a frame of reference. He said the words without thinking, quiet and stunned, like an apology meant for the wrong person. He said it was the wrong room. That was the only sentence spoken in that moment, and it did not belong to him, but it explained more than anything else could have. He had expected someone else's space. He had expected safety. He had not expected me. She scrambled up from the floor, hands shaking, hair disheveled, wrapping paper stuck to her skin. She tried to pull herself together too quickly, which only made it worse. She reached for a blanket, knocked over a box of ornaments, and stepped back like she was afraid of where I might move next. Her face did not show confusion. It showed calculation. I did not yell. I did not move toward either of them. I stood where I was and let the reality settle into place. This was not a misunderstanding. This was not an accident. The wrapping paper on the floor was meant for my family. The time was chosen. The silence had been planned. The man started speaking again, trying to explain himself, but she cut him off with a look that made it clear he was no longer useful. That look told me more than anything he could have said. This was not a moment she lost control of. This was a moment she had rehearsed surviving. I asked him one question, and it was not shouted or emotional. I asked whose apartment he thought he was in. He hesitated, looked at her, then back at me, and answered honestly because he had no reason to lie to me. He said he believed she lived alone. He said she told him that weeks ago. He said I had already moved out. That explanation rearranged everything. It meant this was not impulsive. It meant this was ongoing. It meant she had been creating a version of reality for him that excluded me completely, not as a partner, not as an obstacle, but as someone already erased. She tried to interrupt, but I raised my hand, not aggressively, just enough to signal that I was not finished listening. He kept talking, faster now, like someone realizing they had stepped into something deeper than they signed up for. He explained that she invited him over because she said she needed help wrapping gifts and did not want to be alone. He explained he thought the gifts were for her family, not for a wedding they both knew was coming. The word wedding hung in the air without being spoken by either of them. It existed anyway. She stepped forward then, finally trying to reassert control. She said this was not what it looked like. She said things had been complicated. She said there had been distance, pressure, misunderstandings. None of those explanations connected to the man standing half-dressed in our bedroom. I told him he should leave. I did not insult him or threaten him. I told him to get his things and go. He looked at her one last time, searching for guidance, but she gave him nothing. He grabbed his shirt, his jacket, and his phone, and walked past me without meeting my eyes. When the door closed behind him, the apartment did not feel quieter. It felt heavier, like sound itself was trapped under pressure. She started talking immediately, as if silence might give me room to think. She explained timelines, emotions, grievances, all framed carefully to make this feel like a shared failure instead of a unilateral decision. She said she did not plan for me to come home early. She said that part over and over, as if the problem was my arrival, not her actions. I asked her how long. She did not answer directly. She said things had been building for months. That was not an answer, and she knew it. I asked again. She finally said long enough to matter. I looked around the room. The wrapping paper was torn beyond reuse. The gifts were visible now. Some were for my parents. Some were for hers. Some were for people who would never receive them. I picked up a small box I recognized and set it back down carefully, because breaking things would not change anything, and I needed clarity more than release. I asked her why she told him I had moved out. That was the question that broke the rhythm of her explanations. She hesitated just long enough to confirm that the answer mattered. She said she did not want complications. She said she wanted things to feel simple. That sentence explained more than anything else she had said. She wanted a version of life without friction, without accountability, without consequences, and she was willing to rewrite reality to get it. I told her to sit down, not because I needed authority, but because the conversation was not ending quickly, and I needed it to stay grounded. She sat on the edge of the bed, hands clenched together, eyes fixed on the floor like that position might earn sympathy. I told her this conversation was not about feelings anymore. I told her it was about decisions and outcomes. I told her she had invited someone into our home under false pretenses, lied about my existence, and done it at a time when she knew exactly what it would cost if discovered. She tried to argue that nothing was that simple. She said relationships were layered. She said people drifted. She said I was making this into something larger than it needed to be. That was the moment I understood the real danger of the situation. She was not trying to deny what happened. She was trying to reduce its weight. She was trying to compress the consequences until they fit into a manageable inconvenience. I asked her if her parents knew. She looked up sharply. That question landed harder than anything else so far. She asked why that mattered. I told her it mattered because weddings involved families, money, commitments, and public truth, and because I would not carry this alone. She stood up then, voice tightening, posture defensive. She said we did not need to involve anyone else. She said we could handle this privately. She said things would only get messy if other people were brought in. That fear confirmed everything. She was not afraid of losing me in that moment. She was afraid of losing control of the story. I told her I was not leaving the apartment that night. I told her she could sleep on the couch if she wanted space. I told her we would not pretend this had not happened. I told her the engagement was not something she got to pause while she figured out what she wanted. She accused me of being dramatic. She accused me of threatening her stability. She accused me of trying to punish her emotionally. I told her calmly that consequences were not punishments. They were results. The argument circled for hours without raising volume, which somehow made it worse. Every time she tried to frame herself as confused or overwhelmed, the image of the wrapping paper on the floor came back into focus. Every time she tried to suggest mutual responsibility, the man's words about me already being gone echoed louder. Eventually, she stopped talking and stared at the wall, like someone waiting out a storm rather than preparing for the aftermath. I stayed awake that night, sitting at the kitchen table, watching the clock move forward, thinking about timelines and choices and the quiet efficiency with which she had tried to remove me from her life without actually letting go of the benefits I provided. I thought about the wedding deposits, the guest list, the promises already made to people who trusted us. By morning, one thing was clear. This was not a moment to process slowly. This was a moment that would accelerate whether either of us wanted it to or not. The door had already been opened. Nothing that followed would be small. I watched the apartment change as daylight moved across it, exposing things that had blended into the background for months. The couch where she eventually sat upright without speaking. The coat rack filled with jackets that suggested stability. The table stacked with invitations that now felt like evidence rather than plans. By morning, the apartment stopped feeling shared and started feeling staged, like a set built to sell a version of life that had already collapsed. Celeste woke late and moved carefully, as if the air itself might react badly to sudden motion. She did not approach me. She made coffee and avoided eye contact, which told me she was not trying to fix anything yet. She was waiting to see what I would do. That waiting was deliberate. It meant she believed time might soften the edges of what happened, or that I might retreat into silence and allow her space to reshape the narrative. I told her we needed to talk again, not because I wanted closure, but because logistics had already started forming in my head. She nodded without resistance, which felt wrong. There was no pleading. There was no visible fear. That absence was its own warning. She started by saying we both needed to be careful. The word careful was chosen with precision. It was not about emotions or healing. It was about risk management. She explained that involving others would complicate things. She said weddings created pressure and misunderstandings. She said families did not need to know everything immediately. The structure of her argument revealed the plan beneath it. She was already preparing a version of events where this moment could be minimized, delayed, or reframed until it lost its impact. She spoke as if the goal was containment rather than truth. I asked her what she had already told people. That question shifted the balance of the conversation instantly. She hesitated, then said she had not said anything concrete yet. She said she had only expressed uncertainty. She said she had mentioned feeling unsupported, overwhelmed, unsure about timing. None of those statements were lies on their own, but together they formed a foundation for something much worse. She had been seeding doubt in advance. I realized then that the man from the night before was not the first audience for her revised version of reality. He was just the one who crossed a line visibly. Others had been prepared quietly. Her parents, her sister, a few close friends. The story had been under construction long before I walked through the bedroom door. I told her I would be contacting her parents myself. Not to accuse, not to dramatize, just to explain what happened. Her reaction was immediate and unguarded. She stood up too fast, knocked over her chair, and told me that would destroy everything. She said it would humiliate her. She said it would force people to take sides before she had time to explain. That last part confirmed everything. She did not want time to heal. She wanted time to edit. She tried a different angle. She said the wedding deposits were non-refundable. She said the venue had strict cancellation policies. She said the invitations were already sent. She said backing out now would cost thousands and strain relationships permanently. She framed staying together as the responsible option, not because she believed in us, but because she believed in minimizing damage to her image. I asked her whose money paid those deposits. She answered too quickly. She said it came from our joint planning. That phrasing was intentional. It blurred ownership. It implied shared consent. I asked again, more directly. She admitted the funds came from my account, transferred gradually, labeled as wedding expenses. That mattered. It meant she had committed financial decisions using my resources while preparing a future that excluded me. It meant she was willing to secure benefits from a relationship she was actively dismantling. I told her we would be reviewing every expense. She said that felt punitive. I told her transparency was not punishment. She did not argue that point. She only said it would make things ugly. The conversation shifted again when I asked about the man. Not about feelings, but about logistics. How often he had been there. Whether he had keys. Whether he knew our schedules. She insisted he was not important, that he was a distraction, that he did not matter. People do not lie that hard about things that do not matter. She admitted he had been over more than once. She admitted she chose times when she knew I would be unavailable. She admitted she told him the apartment was effectively hers. Each admission arrived reluctantly, but they connected cleanly, forming a timeline that made sense in the worst possible way. I told her to call him and clarify the situation. Not to accuse him, just to correct the lie. She refused. She said there was no point. She said involving him again would reopen wounds. She said she wanted to focus on us. That refusal was not about protecting him. It was about protecting the illusion she had sold. If she corrected the lie, it would confirm she had deliberately erased me. She needed him confused, not informed. I contacted him myself. Not emotionally, not confrontationally. I sent a short message explaining that the apartment was shared, that I had not moved out, and that the situation had been misrepresented. His response came quickly and without defensiveness. He apologized. He said he had no idea. He said he would not have been there if he had known. He said she told him the engagement was over. That last sentence landed with more force than anything else so far. She had ended our engagement in private while maintaining it publicly. She had allowed two realities to coexist as long as they did not collide. When I told her what he said, she did not deny it. She said she needed space to think and did not want to have a dramatic breakup conversation yet. She said she was waiting for the right time. She said I was being inflexible. I told her there was no flexible version of betrayal. I told her the collision had already happened. The rest of the day unraveled quickly. Messages started coming in from wedding vendors confirming meetings she had scheduled without me. A florist asking about color changes. A coordinator asking to finalize seating arrangements. Each notification was proof that she had continued planning publicly while disengaging privately. I contacted the venue directly and requested a hold on further changes. Not a cancellation yet, just a pause. That action alone triggered a reaction I had not anticipated. Her sister arrived at the apartment unannounced that evening, clearly upset and clearly informed. She asked what was going on. She said Celeste sounded distressed. She said their parents were confused. She said something about the story was not lining up. That moment marked the beginning of exposure, even though I had not initiated it. The system she built to control information was already cracking under its own weight. I explained what happened without embellishment. I explained the timing. I explained the lie about me moving out. I explained the financial overlap. Her sister listened without interrupting, which told me she was already questioning what she had been told. Celeste tried to interject several times, but each attempt felt less convincing than the last. The story she had prepared relied on isolation. Once another person was present, it began to fail. Her sister left quietly, saying she needed to speak with their parents. Celeste accused me of orchestrating that outcome. I told her I had not planned anything. I told her reality had simply caught up. That night, she slept on the couch. I stayed in the bedroom. not as a power move, but because the bed no longer felt neutral. The wrapping paper was gone, but the impression remained. By the next morning, messages from her parents began appearing on my phone. Requests to talk. Confusion. Concern. No accusations. Just questions. Celeste asked me not to respond yet. She said she needed time to prepare. She said she wanted to explain things in her own words. She said she deserved that chance. I told her the truth did not need preparation. I told her delaying would only deepen the damage. The engagement was already collapsing. What remained was the question of how loudly. As the day moved forward, I realized something that shifted my perspective completely. This was not about salvaging a relationship or ending one cleanly. This was about disentangling myself from a structure she had been using to stabilize her life while quietly planning a different future. By evening, the pace increased again. The venue called back asking for confirmation. The florist requested a deposit extension. Her parents requested a meeting. The window for quiet resolution had closed. Everything from this point forward would happen in public, whether she liked it or not. And she knew it. By the third day, the situation stopped feeling personal and started feeling procedural. Conversations turned into schedules. Emotions turned into obligations. Every decision created a ripple that reached someone else, and those ripples started intersecting whether Celeste wanted them to or not. Her parents asked to meet in person. They did not frame it as an intervention or a confrontation. They framed it as concern, which made it harder to dodge. Celeste insisted we go together. She said it would look better. She said it would show unity. I agreed, not because I believed in unity anymore, but because separating narratives at that stage would only extend the confusion. The meeting took place at their house, a space that had always been welcoming and carefully maintained. Holiday decorations were already up, which made the timing feel especially unforgiving. There is something uniquely destabilizing about discussing betrayal under string lights and garland. It removes any illusion of distance. We sat at the dining table, her parents across from us, her sister off to the side, quieter than usual. The atmosphere was tense, but not hostile. They were waiting for clarity, not drama. Celeste began speaking first, which I expected. She positioned the situation as a breakdown that happened gradually. She spoke about stress, misalignment, feeling lost. She avoided specifics. She avoided timelines. She avoided accountability. Her version of events created emotional fog without revealing the shape of what actually happened. When she finished, the silence that followed did not invite sympathy. It invited facts. I explained exactly what I saw when I came home. I explained the presence of the other man, the lie about me moving out, and the timing. I explained it plainly, without adding commentary or interpretation. I focused on actions rather than motivations. That distinction mattered more than I anticipated. Her father asked one question that changed the direction of the entire conversation. He asked whether this had been going on before the engagement. Celeste hesitated. That hesitation was enough. She tried to reframe again, but the momentum had shifted. Her parents began asking questions she could not answer without contradicting herself. Dates did not align. Explanations overlapped. The emotional narrative she built did not support the logistical reality. The turning point came when her sister spoke. She confirmed that Celeste had told her weeks earlier that the relationship was essentially over. She confirmed that Celeste said I was already preparing to leave. She confirmed that she had been asked to keep that information quiet until things settled. That disclosure collapsed the remaining structure of Celeste's story. It demonstrated intent. It demonstrated planning. It demonstrated awareness. Her parents did not raise their voices. That made it worse. Disappointment, delivered calmly, has a different weight. They asked Celeste why she continued planning the wedding if she believed the relationship was already finished. She answered vaguely. She said she was unsure. She said she needed time. Time was no longer available. The discussion moved from emotions to consequences. Wedding contracts were brought up. Financial contributions were clarified. It became clear very quickly that most of the deposits came from me, either directly or indirectly. That revelation changed how responsibility was distributed in the room. Her mother asked Celeste whether she understood the legal implications of what she had done. That question did not come from anger. It came from concern that bordered on disbelief. The meeting ended without resolution, but it did not end without impact. Her parents asked for space. They asked for documentation. They asked for honesty moving forward. Celeste left that house without the protection she expected. On the drive back, she accused me of humiliating her. She said I weaponized the truth. She said I could have handled things privately. I told her privacy was no longer an option once other people's money, time, and trust were involved. The next escalation happened faster than expected. The venue contacted me directly after speaking with her parents. They wanted clarification on who was authorized to make decisions. They wanted confirmation before proceeding further. That call forced a choice I had been delaying. I informed them that the wedding was on hold indefinitely. Not canceled yet, just suspended. That single administrative action triggered contractual mechanisms Celeste had not anticipated. Vendor notifications went out automatically. Deposits were flagged. Penalties were outlined. Celeste panicked. Not emotionally. Strategically. She realized control was slipping in ways she could not reverse through conversation alone. She attempted to salvage her position socially. Messages began circulating among mutual friends presenting the situation as mutual drift rather than betrayal. That effort failed quickly. Stories contradicted each other. Screenshots existed. Timelines did not match. People began asking questions she could not answer without further exposure. The other man reached out again. He apologized a second time and asked if he could speak to her parents to clarify his role. That offer removed the last plausible defense she had. She declined it. That refusal was noticed. By the end of the week, the engagement was effectively over in every way except official language. Invitations were rescinded quietly. Some guests asked for explanations. Others simply stopped responding. Silence became its own verdict. The most destabilizing moment came when her father requested a private conversation with me. He did not accuse. He did not defend. He asked whether I believed reconciliation was possible. I answered honestly. I said trust had been deliberately dismantled over time. I said rebuilding would require accountability that had not been offered. He thanked me for my honesty. He said he wished things had been different. That was the moment I understood the finality of what was unfolding. This was no longer a dispute between two people. It was a realignment of relationships. Celeste moved out 2 days later. Not dramatically, not in a rush. She packed what she needed and left the rest. That decision felt intentional. She was preparing for a version of events where she could return if circumstances changed. They did not. As she left, she told me this was not over. She said people would forget. She said things could still be repaired. I did not respond, not because I had nothing to say, but because the situation no longer required persuasion. The exposure phase was complete. The damage was documented. The narratives had collided, and one had failed to survive contact with reality. What remained were consequences that could not be negotiated away, and they were just beginning. Once Celeste left the apartment, the pace slowed in a way that felt unnatural. Not calm, not relief, but a quiet that only shows up after something irreversible has happened. The space no longer argued with itself. The air felt neutral again, stripped of performance. What followed was not emotional fallout. It was administrative reality, and it moved with a precision she had not planned for. The first consequence arrived through email. The venue sent a formal notice outlining the suspension terms, the forfeited portion of the deposit, and the remaining balance owed if the contract was terminated rather than postponed. The language was dry and procedural. No blame, no sympathy. Just numbers, dates, and responsibility. Because the account used for payment was mine, the correspondence came directly to me. I forwarded it to Celeste without commentary. Her response was immediate and sharp. She said she never agreed to be financially liable on her own. She said we made those decisions together. She said canceling without her consent was unfair. I replied once, explaining that joint decisions require joint honesty, and that misrepresentation dissolves shared obligation. I did not argue beyond that. The paper trail spoke clearly enough. Her parents contacted me again, this time not with questions, but with information. They had reviewed the contracts. They had spoken to the vendors. They understood now how much of the wedding infrastructure was funded through me. That understanding shifted their posture completely. Support did not look like anger. It looked like boundaries. They informed Celeste that they would not be covering penalties tied to decisions she made while concealing the state of the relationship. They told her she would need to resolve the financial consequences herself. That decision did more damage than any confrontation could have. It reframed the situation from emotional misjudgment to adult accountability. She tried to negotiate her way out of it. She suggested compromises. She asked whether postponement might reduce penalties. She argued that stress impaired her judgment. None of those arguments mattered. The contracts did not contain emotional clauses. The next consequence surfaced socially, and it was faster than expected. Mutual friends stopped asking for updates. Invitations to holiday gatherings quietly disappeared, not out of hostility, but out of discomfort. People do not like being asked to validate contradictions. They choose distance instead. Her version of events fractured under repetition. Each retelling required small adjustments. Each adjustment created new inconsistencies. Eventually, people stopped asking altogether. The man she had involved did not return. He sent one final message, stating clearly that he wanted no further contact and did not want to be included in whatever explanation she offered others. That exit removed the last external variable she could blame. The situation collapsed inward. I focused on disentanglement. Accounts were separated. Shared subscriptions were canceled. Wedding-related purchases were documented and returned where possible. I contacted vendors directly and resolved outstanding balances. None of it was dramatic. That was the point. Drama would have created room for reinterpretation. She attempted one final maneuver that revealed how deeply she misunderstood what had changed. She asked whether we could publicly present the breakup as mutual, at least temporarily, to protect her professional reputation. She framed it as a courtesy, something civilized people do. I declined, not out of spite, but because mutual implies shared responsibility. I told her I would not contradict the truth to soften the consequences of deliberate deception. I did not threaten exposure. I simply refused to participate in revision. Her response to that refusal was quiet anger. Not explosive, calculated. She accused me of controlling the narrative. I reminded her that narratives collapse when facts are consistent. The final consequence arrived indirectly, through her parents again. They informed me that Celeste would be moving back in with them temporarily. Not because they supported her actions, but because they believed distance was necessary. They also informed her that financial independence would be expected moving forward. No more shared accounts. No informal support. No insulation. That decision changed her trajectory more than she realized at the time. It forced immediate adjustments. Employment conversations. Budget realities. A public step backward she had been trying to avoid for months. I moved out of the apartment shortly after, not because I was pushed, but because the space no longer served a purpose. I relocated closer to work, streamlined my routine, and redirected energy toward stability rather than recovery. There was nothing to process emotionally that had not already been processed through action. The wedding was officially canceled 1 week later. The venue confirmed it. The vendors closed their files. Guests received brief notices. Some reached out with sympathy. Others did not. Life redistributed attention quickly. Celeste attempted to contact me several times after that. Not to reconcile, but to negotiate perception. She asked whether I planned to tell anyone else. She asked whether I would correct rumors. She asked whether time might soften my position. I did not respond. The absence of response did not function as punishment. It functioned as closure. She no longer had access to the structure she used to manage outcomes. Months later, I learned through indirect channels that the consequences continued unfolding. Financial strain, professional setbacks, fractured family dynamics that did not resolve cleanly. None of it was sudden. All of it was cumulative. I did not celebrate any of it. Consequences do not require witnesses. What remained was clarity. The moment in the bedroom had not ended anything. It had revealed what already existed. Everything that followed was simply alignment. The wrapping paper was thrown out. The gifts were returned. The plans dissolved. What replaced them was not bitterness or relief, but accuracy. And accuracy, once established, does not need reinforcement.